Hi guys, today we're going to be taking a look at web apps for containers, and this is another offering on Azure that's pretty straightforward, and you can spin this up and run web apps in a platform that doesn't require you to know anything about Kubernetes or any of the underlying infrastructure. So this is built on top of Azure App Services, which offers a lot of things that are common to web apps like SSL and scaling and load balancing and all these different kinds of supports that make apps perform and work well. But this is specifically designed for containers. If you can use one of the natively supported platforms like Node.js or .NET or Java, you would probably want to use that instead of a container. But the containers will work if there is a more niche app platform that isn't natively supported by Azure App Services. Microsoft also provides a set of base containers that you can use to customize for your application. Now, these have a bunch of pre-installed components that allow some of the features of Azure App Services to light up when you're using a container. If your application won't work with one of these pre-built images, you can certainly bring your own image. As long as you can get it to work on port 8080 or port 80, it'll work just fine for app services, although not all the features of app services will be available to that application. So with no further ado, I'm going to walk through setting this up in the portal, and I'm going to talk through some of the features that are available to web apps for containers as I do it. And then I'm going to deploy a couple of different containers to it so that you can see how it performs with an application that's a non-trivial example. So to create one of these, it's pretty easy to do. So we're just going to search for app services, and you can then choose app services from the menu. And this is going to pull up all the app services that I have running. You click create here and then go to app right here. And here is where you can configure it. Now there's a lot of options on this, but I'm going to call mine Blaze Keen Demo. So I'm going to be deploying Commander Keen to this. So Blaze Keen Demo is the name of my resource group, and I'm going to give it the same name to the app itself. But this one is going to be blazekeendemo.azurewebsites.net. So that's going to be the URL for my application. Now, notice that I have the ability to deploy 3 different options here. Code is using one of the built-in runtimes, and you have a lot to choose from here. So you have .NET, Go, Java, Node, PHP, Python, and Ruby. If one of these isn't going to work for your application, then this is where you would want to go to a Docker container. So in this case, I'm going to use a Docker container because that's what I'm going to be running for a demo. And in that, I'm going to be running a lot of different software that will not run on any of these built-in environments. Static web apps is something that I'll cover in a future video, but it's basically the ability to deploy an application that just has static content deployed by way of the static CDNs that are available. And so there's no dynamic web pages that are going to be generating a page based on a request. It's basically all pre-rendered stuff. But that's a great way to host single page applications. But in any case, it's not outside the scope of what we're doing here. But in any case, I'm going to choose Docker containers, and I can choose Linux or Windows. I'm going with Linux because that's what I'm most interested in. Now, for the plan, I'm going to have to create a new one. I'm going to name it Blaze Plan right here. And an app service plan is basically a set of capacity that you have for the ability to run multiple web apps in. So I create an app service plan, and then I can carve that up into as many app services as I so choose. So the app service plan in this case is going to be dedicated to all one container that I'm demoing here, so I don't have to create a large one. But in any case, you can explore the pricing plans based on 2 different views here. One is future view, which is basically going to tell you the kind of scale and backups and the kind of storage that you might have. And you can scroll this and see what that is and what that looks like. I like to go with the hardware view because this tells me how much compute capacity and memory and so on that I will have. And the ones that are going to be most conducive for dev test workloads are going to be these tiers right here. As it says, dev test, you can use the free tier for just some basic stuff if you just want to kick the tires on this. But the basic B1, B2, B3 are great for doing dev work if you just want to kick the tires on an application or you're trying to make it work in app services. These are low-cost options, but you wouldn't want to run a production workload in this. And down here, you have the different options for production-oriented workloads. You have the premium SKUs, which are designed for more demanding applications that need faster storage or more high-end compute. And these are more traditional in terms of their ratio of vCPUs to memory. So 1 to 4 looks like is the ratio here. So 1 CPU to 4 gigs of RAM, and that scales up from there. And then the standard is 1 CPU to 1.75 gigs of RAM. And this one is great for more moderate applications or for your entry level into your production level applications. For mine, I'm going to choose the standard S3 because we got 4 cores and 7 gigs. I'm probably going to need 4 cores to run this, or I could probably get away with an S2, but I'm going to use this S3 for this particular demo. And I'm going to select this one. You can use an isolated environment, which is called an app service environment, but this is cordoned off dedicated hardware for running your applications if you don't want to use one of these app services that are going to be in a more shared environment. So you might have your application running on the same physical hardware as somebody else's application, but it's still isolated. In any case, this is just isolated hardware right here. So I'm going to select the S3 for mine. And next, I'm going to configure Docker. Now, I'm going to use a single container for mine, but you can use Docker Compose if you want. Docker Compose allows you to have a set of containers that you want to deploy to this. Now, this would be a main container with maybe a sidecar container. You wouldn't have multiple containers that are your main container. You don't want to deploy a database that's doing this. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. This is designed for applications that have a primary application-oriented container, and then there might be services that are coming alongside of that as sidecars that the application uses. So this is pretty much designed for that scenario. For my scenario, I'm going to be doing a single container, and I'm going to use Docker Hub for mine, and I'm going to use my Blaze / Keen demo. I think it's what it's called. Let me go find that container here. So let's go over to Docker Hub, Blaze right here, and let me find what the name of that particular container is. I forgot what it is. Let's go over here, and it's called DOS Game. This is it right here. And I'll link this in the video description down below so you can download this and play with this if you want, but let's paste that in right there. And I don't need to change the startup command. This is fine for what I'm doing. The startup command allows you to override the built-in one, which for this particular one, I think is using supervisor, so I don't need to change any of that. This allows you to use public and private endpoints. If you want to do that, you can do that with this particular application. So if I wanted to create a private application on a private network and then put something in front of that, like a web app gateway, an application gateway, or I wanted to put some kind of virtual network appliance or something like that in front of it, I could do that by putting it on a private endpoint using this networking, but I'm going to expose it publicly here. Monitoring, I can enable application services on this, but for this particular one, it might be a little bit harder to get app services integrated. It'll report back the Docker logs because of the output from the Docker container, but this won't have deep integration with the runtime stacks that I'm doing. I would have to do that manually. If I'm running this on one of the built-in platforms, it will naturally integrate with that platform and give you a much richer telemetry for your application if you enable App Insights. Otherwise, I'm just basically getting container logs from this. But in any case, I don't need tags. I'm going to review and create. And with this particular one, I can then click create, and that's going to start the creation process of this particular container. So now that my resource is deployed, I'm going to click go to resource, and this is the overview of my container app that's now running. Now, this is pretty much a standard web app like you would expect from Azure App Services, but there's a few things that are different than what you would get with a typical experience for app services. And most of that has to do with the configuration right here. Now, under the configuration, this enables you to basically configure the container itself, but it also gives you the ability to configure storage, which is not something you can do with an app service. So underneath this port mapping right here, I can create an Azure storage mount, which I'm going to do that in just a minute. But before we get to that, I want to look at just an overview of these different things that are common to app services. So authentication, application insights, identity backups, all of these different things are pretty common to everything that you could do in a standard app services plan. Now, with the scale up and the scale out, the scale up is the ability to increase the tier of your app service plan. Scale out allows you to have multiple instances of an application. So if I wanted to have multiple instances of my container running, I could do that with a scale out. Now, this particular container that I am running here isn't really conducive for that, but if I wanted to create a serverless application or maybe a microservice application that's running in app services, what that allows me to do is have multiple instances of this running side by side, and it's going to load balance it between all of those. Now, a couple of the things that you can do with this is SSH into this. Now, the SSH won't work for this particular container because it's not configured for it, but this is where you could use one of those base containers that I mentioned already. And if you use one of those base containers, you can SSH into the container and get a console basically at the container level that will allow you to do things in the container. So that's one of those cool features about this. Of course, the API management is for API definitions and different kinds of things. Like if you want to turn on the ability to automatically configure APIs, you can use these settings. CORS, of course, is for cross-origin resource sharing. And these are for all of the different kinds of things that you can do with this. App service log and health checks and the container logs if you want to review those. And these aren't being written to any kind of service as of right now because I didn't enable it. But if I want to get a log stream, I can do that. And it's basically just going to give me the output for the container right here, which allows me to debug things in real time. And this is what it would look like, exactly like if I was running this inside of the terminal on my local box here. So let's go ahead and launch this just to see what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and launch this particular one. And here is the directory listing for this particular application. And I'm going to click on VNC right here and connect. And I'm going to get password 1 right here. And it's running my DOS game, my DOS environment right here. So let's install this. And this is going to install the game. It's installing it on the app service right now. And the app service itself doesn't have a storage account associated with it. So it's actually using the disk that's associated with the compute that I reserved rather than using an external storage. So this is not something you want to do for a production app. You could install the application, but if you needed any kind of permanent storage, you wouldn't use the built-in storage for this. And you would want to use something external to it, which on a container is typically going to be a file share of some kind. So this is running fairly well on this particular compute capacity right here. And I'm able to play the game fairly smoothly here without a lot of tearing or shearing or anything like that. So again, a fairly neat game. If you like to play Commander Keen, this is my demo for that. But with this in mind, I'm going to take this same concept and I'm going to mount some storage into it to show you that feature as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount some storage into it and I'm going to upload a game to that. And then I'm going to then mount that storage into my container. And then that will allow me to have a persistent storage rather than the more ephemeral storage in case this restarts or something like that. And so I could save my games or save my high scores or whatever it might be. But that's just to show you how the storage works under the hood. What I've done for this is I've changed the container over to RetroArch. And what I'm going to do here is now I'm going to mount a ROM into the container so that you can see me load a ROM and then I can play the game inside of the browser. So to do this, I'm going to go over here to the configuration, and the configuration allows me to attach a storage account to this guy. So I'm going to go over here to path mappings and I'm going to have a storage amount. I'm going to call it ROMs, and then my storage account, I'm going to call it Blaze ROMs right here. And I'm going to use Azure Files, and then I'm going to choose that for the storage container. And then the path I'm going to mount it to is /ROMs inside of the container. And then I'm going to click OK. And then that's going to basically restart the container. I'm going to save this, and then that's going to take a second to restart the container. And once that's done, we'll come back and I'll show you it without and with a ROM. So I launched RetroArch from the container. I just basically pointed to the same URL and then launched VNC and logged in. I already configured this to run SNES games. So I'm going to go over here to load content, and I'm going to show you that ROMs folder where everything should be mounted from the storage. I haven't currently loaded anything here, so it's currently empty. So let's go back up to the main menu and let's go back over here to Azure and actually upload something to that storage account. Now this is the storage account that I created, and I'm going to upload to this ROMs storage account right here, this file share. Now to do that, I can go over here to browse, and then from here I can then go over here to upload, and in upload I can browse to a file, and I have my game appear inside of this Nextcloud folder. I think it's called Mario Kart SFC, and I'm going to upload that. And so Mario Kart is now uploaded into that storage account. Now with that, I should be able to go back over here to load content, go back over here to the root, find my ROMs, and there is that file I just uploaded. So that's mounted in the container now. Now with that, I should be able to launch it and then play my game. And so this is loading Mario Kart for SNES. So when I play this, it's now playable inside of the browser. And I'm not very good at this game, but just to show you that it's running, I can load up a 50cc match and just start playing the game right here. So if you like this, please consider subscribing to the channel and all that jazz. If you have any questions, you can drop those down in the comment section down below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll be doing this same basic demo in the future as we look at other container options on Azure. We'll be doing something with web apps for containers, and also a lot of stuff around AKS, and probably look at some OpenShift and things like that.
If you like this content, please consider subscribing to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button. You can also like this content by clicking on the thumbs up, or share this content with your friends, and also comment in the comment section down below. You can also find me online at www.blaze.net or on Twitter at @TheOneMule. And as always, thanks for watching.